Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to That's a Take. Here we are, episode 4, an episode that I've been looking forward to getting out there since I recorded it, and it's about a topic a lot of people have reached out about. Today we were speaking with Tarrell Christie about visual effects. I honestly didn't know much about visual effects, but this conversation has really piqued my curiosity. But more so, I have to just thank Tarrell and all my guests so far for their continued vulnerability. When I first started this podcast, I didn't realize how much vulnerability it takes to come on a podcast and share your knowledge and experiences. So I really have to shout them out. This podcast has taught me so much already, and it's really helped to reinforce why I love collaborating and making films. In this episode, Tarrell was incredibly honest about his wins and setbacks during his filmmaking career. We got to speak about how he got into visual effects, what inspired him, what the different subcategories of VFX there are, and how he's used VFX in his own films. We reference his Godzilla films, his films FLAVA and Miles, all of which highlight his visual effects talents. I think you'll all take away some really great information from our discussion, so here it is, my conversation with Tarrell Christie about visual effects. Yeah, once the headphones go on, it's like, it's real, you know? You're like, I can hear myself so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm super stoked to talk to you today. I mean, to be honest, I don't know much about visual effects. I've done very little work in even After Effects.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of coming at this conversation as a newbie.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the patience and
no problem.
Understanding.
Yeah, I have to explain it a lot, so I'm ready for this.
Yeah. Well, it's like that's another reason why I think so many people wanted me to talk to someone that did visual effects. I've done some polls on Instagram, and that's always something somebody says that they want to hear about.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, because it's very mystified. It seems very complex.
100%. Yeah.
And like anything with filmmaking, when you begin to break it down a little bit, it's easier to understand. But like at first glance, like visual effects is like magic. You know, it's like you're making things appear that aren't there.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive. How did you start in visual effects? Like, what was the genesis of your interest in this?
Yeah. It was probably connected to when I first wanted to be a filmmaker, which was Peter Jackson's King Kong. That was like I feel like a lot of filmmakers have like that movie that was kind of the thing that got them into it. And that was the one for me. And I remember like a year or so after it came out, they put out this special edition 3-disc. I grabbed it, and it had like hours of just the entire process of making the movie, beginning to end. Like literally in the computer rooms, post-production, like they go over Foley. Like it essentially was kind of my film school. And like the big thing from that movie I took away was like, what can I do to make like King Kong a thing? Like I didn't know if that was visual effects. Like I have no idea how they pulled it off, but like I needed to know how they did it. And they really broke it down, showing Andy Serkis doing the motion capture performance. It was really just like mind-blowing. First off, that it could even be a job. Like that alone, like I didn't know how movies were made. I kind of just assumed they popped up. But really just seeing them just like in the trenches making this movie, like the ups and downs, it just seemed like such a fun adventure, and I just wanted to learn all of it, like visual effects, cinematography, writing. Like that really kind of just is what got me into everything.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something I kind of miss now with how movies are put out, is those behind the scenes.
Oh, it's a tragedy.
It is, yeah. And often like I'll put something on my iPad when I'm eating lunch. I'm one of those people, like I like to watch something. Yeah. And a lot of the time it's BTS of some film I find on YouTube, and I almost always learn something, or I'm taking a screenshot like, oh, they put the light there, or this is, you know. And it's, you know, with indie filmmaking, there's so much of that we have to do on our own, which is kind of discovery. So you talked about the DVD, but where'd you go from there? Like, what was the kind of the next step after you kind of got that bug and you're like, oh, I want to do this. Like, what was next?
Yeah, so I didn't probably start visual effects until maybe 4 years into starting. So this is like 2007 I started, so probably, like 2009, 2010-ish. Mainly because my camera I originally had was a VHS, so there was no plugging it into a computer. Like when I got a camera that could do that, that was like the state of the art. Like we're breaking the ceiling.
Yeah.
And so there's this program called Wax 2.0. I don't even know if it's around anymore. But it allowed you to do like just really cheap effects. Like you could do a lightsaber effect of just like putting 2 points and it would just kind of make a lightsaber, and you would frame by frame have to go through and, you know, do all the motions. So I kind of played around with that. And it also could do blood splatters. That was the big thing I was really into, is you could do CGI blood, because I was always afraid of getting blood like on my mom's carpet or on the walls. So like once I could do that, that was like groundbreaking. Same with like gunfire. That was like a big thing. Like I got to learn how to make guns fire. And yeah, so I started with that. And I'd say visual effects didn't really ramp up for me until in high school, because I was in a broadcast journalism class taught by Mr. Winkle, who's like, I love him. He's my Miyagi. Like I love Mr. Winkle. Shout out to Mr. Winkle. And basically for that class, we had to make a series of videos every 2 weeks. And it, you know, some people would do like sports broadcasting, news, we wanted to do short films, but he was like, that's not really fully broadcast. But we somehow turned it to where, like, if we do parodies, like he was okay with us doing parodies of movies, but we couldn't do movies. So for 3 years throughout high school, every 2 weeks, I essentially was making a short film, parodying some other type of movie. And since it was a parody, they're all goofy. And so that kind of allowed me to really, with visual effects, try out a lot of stuff. And that would kind of be my big advice to anyone who wants to start visual effects, is like, start with really dumb comedies, because the visual effects can be bad and it actually just works as a gag. But you're actually learning those skills, and you do that enough. Like 3 years of doing that just like propelled my visual effects skills really to an insane amount. It's really just, you just have to keep going and keep going and keep going. And yeah, I'd say that's probably where the visual effects thing really started.
What a great training ground. I mean, there's so much for me to unpack there, because you touched upon a lot of things I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up education. Shout out Mr. Winkle.
Shout out Mr. Winkle.
Because like, I think a lot of people's filmmaking journey typically will start, I've found, in high school or middle school, you know, and typically from an educational beginning.
Yeah.
We had a TV video class in high school, and that is where I really saw the promise of like storytelling as well. Like, because I was doing stuff on my own, but then like when you get to show it to an audience, it totally changes everything, and it like makes it real. And then, you know, it also is scary to do, but it really like shows you how much of an impact film can have. And it's like another one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm hooked. Like this storytelling medium is amazing, and makes you feel things that, and be able to do things in like the lighthearted approach too is like just as important, you know. And that's really cool to hear that you had that experience in high school. So on a base level, what programs were you working with when you started in high school? Like, what were you using to do your visual effects?
So it was a mix. My main editor was Sony Vegas.
I love Vegas Video.
That was my OG. I love it.
I'm always like so connected with someone when they mention Vegas. I'm like, yes, you know how good Vegas was.
No, and I had to do like so now I use After Effects, and this is just a big example of like just how much Sony Vegas wasn't built for what I was doing. In After Effects, if you move something across the screen, you can press a button and it automatically will calculate, you know, the motion blur for you, and like how that would work with shutter speed and all that. Sony Vegas didn't have that, so when I wanted motion blur, I would actually have to put a blur effect on it and keyframe it to where it would go over time, and just have to guess like what that would look like. So very barbaric. I wouldn't recommend doing visual effects in Sony Vegas. But I used that up until, I'd say maybe like 2018.
Okay.
That, and then there's this program that's not around anymore called Vision Lab. And that just had like all these presets of like lightning bolts, machine guns, like just all this stuff. So anything I would do that would involve that kind of crazy stuff, that would be my program.
And so sort of a bridge question here is, how quickly does the technology that you use change? How often are you having to like abandon a certain program to go to another one? Or is it like every 5 years there's sort of turnaround? Or are we in a position now where things are sort of cemented as these are the go-to programs?
Yeah, that's something I like about visual effects compared to like the cinematography world. Like, you know, there's always the lenses, the new cameras, just always constantly. with visual effects, there's always new stuff coming out, but it's only things that will make your process easier. Like if I joined like the 3D stuff I'm doing now 10 years ago, it would be significantly harder than when I did 4 years ago. Like they pretty much just streamline everything. Especially now with Resolve has their own kind of After Effects. I think it's called Fusion. I haven't played around with it, but I hear it's great. I think free. I think it's a part of like the free pack and everything. So really, it's kind of just choose the program you're comfortable with. And the only thing that really just holds you back is kind of just like your skill. Like the more time you put into it, the upgrades are only just going to make your stuff better. You're not really worried about being obsolete. I guess it's really just on your skill level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And would you say that the playing field is a little bit more level as far as FX goes today? Like more people have access to these things that you can do a lot of things with?
Oh, 100%. I mean, now there's even packs where you can just literally drag and drop whatever the effect is, whether it's like an explosion or like you don't even have to go into the nitty gritty of, how do I build that? How do I color? Like there's so many ways to where like you can really jump in. There's still a lot of, philosophies, like any art form you still need to follow that you learn over time. But yeah, there's really all you need to get into visual effects now is just time.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm finding as I get older in filmmaking in general. Like you can have resources, you can have the ideas, honestly, if you don't have the time, like that is the hard, like time management is such an incredible skill that I really should have prepared for more. Like, cause when I first started, middle school, high school, like all the time in the world, like I was kind of a dork in high school. So like, I'm just in the lab cooking film stuff.
Yeah.
I can't do that as much now. Like, I got jobs, I have a wife, I have responsibilities. So learning that balance and time management, that's really, if there's anything I can say for visual effects is you just have to really just put time into it.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean, that's a key takeaway for any subject to do with filmmaking is time management, and time is so valuable. And honestly, I've seen that happen with a lot of people that get locked into, whether they're working on a show or they're working at a production company, when some of that time to create your own projects is kind of taken from you, it's hard to find that time. And like,
it really is. Yeah.
Some people are so prolific and I'm like, how do you do this? It's really impressive. But I'm glad you brought that up because, really like we're trying to teach people best practices here. And like visual effects is something that, like you said, you just have to be patient with. You need to dedicate time to learn and dedicate time to do the thing.
Yeah.
When you were learning, were there specific resources that helped you learn visual effects, like websites, message boards, books, anything like that? You mentioned the DVD behind the scenes features, but like what were you using to sort of teach yourself as you were going along?
Yeah, YouTube was the biggest resource. The YouTube channel Film Riot specifically. Do you know Film Riot at all? Yeah, like those were like they just go into very specific, like, hey, want to make a friend's head explode, want to make like just all these things that you'd be like, like I would like to do that in a movie sometime. They would just kind of like give you these prompts almost and help and like teach you. And they'd go into the programs and show you how they were doing it. So like that was really helpful. I'd say the thing that like really ramped up my visual effects was in college. I got a subscription to Lynda, which now I think is LinkedIn Learning. I think it got purchased or something. But there was an After Effects course in there by Mark Christensen, who's a visual effects artist that's worked on like Pirates of the Caribbean, like all these different movies. And he really just like not only taught me like visual effects, but like a lot of the like philosophies about it. Like one I love that he taught me that I still use today is that like if you zoom in, nothing is ever perfectly in focus, and that's a thing a lot of visual effects people don't notice. Like they'll just drop the thing in. But if you go in and even just put a little bit of blur, like the amount that it just blends with it is like crazy. Like that really, I think set like a really big foundation for me for visual effects.
Yeah, and it's those sort of markers that you use in a career to be like, oh, this was a turning point. This is where I sort of figured something out. And those are like, I think what keep people going, those sort of aha moments, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
That's really cool to hear that you were able to learn this just on the internet. I mean, we're talking on a podcast. It's going to go on the internet. I think the internet is the number one source for education and knowledge
Yeah.
as a filmmaker. And what I think is interesting is in the visual effects world, it seems to be almost an unspoken bond of like you have no problem showing people how you do things. And I saw on your YouTube channel you just show people how you did it. Like, why do you do that? And like, is that a thing in visual effects where everybody just sort of, it's an unspoken thing? It's like, oh, we're just going to show how the sausage is made to everybody, you know?
Yeah. It's definitely some. It was, part of it is when I was younger, I would just get really frustrated. Not even just visual effects, but just a lot of filmmakers in general that would just lock everything, like, you know, don't know what they're shooting on. You don't know their lens. They're not sharing any, like, it's just holding all this wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that if you have the ability to teach filmmaking and pass on what you're learning, you almost kind of have a duty to, because that's what filmmaking community is, just literally building blocks that, I mean, and this has been happening since the early 1900s. We're constantly just building upon what has come before us. And so like, and I'm also just like, if the only thing that's separating my movies from other ones is just this little secret I'm hiding, then like, it's really not that crazy of a, you know, like I have to have something else that I can actually stand on. So yeah, it's just important, I think, to do that. I kind of wish I could be doing it more, but it's, again, just like a time thing. Like it's one thing to do the visual effects and then to have to like go in and film how you're like, you know, it takes a lot of time, and I kind of wish I could do it more. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the circle of life of a filmmaker is, you know, you get inspired, you make movies, someone sees your movie, they get inspired, they make it, and then it just keeps going. And I don't know, not sharing that knowledge, I feel like is just a disservice to like you and any kind of like legacy you would want to pass on with, you know, your work or anything.
Yeah, really well said. I think that's the ethos of this entire podcast is like, send the elevator back down. You know, if you learn something, if you have a success, you know, try to share it with people, because time and again on this podcast, you're going to hear the word community, because that's what it's about. We can't make films alone.
Right.
I mean, you can. People can make films alone.
Yeah.
But at some point, you bring community into it, because if you show people, then you're bringing community, even if you did it by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Which most people don't make films by themselves. There are people that do that. And I mean, it seems like you've taken on a lot of the work when you make films. Like you kind of do it all, it seems like.
Kind of. It's something I'm definitely kind of trying to move away from. It kind of just came out of necessity, as like when I'm a kid, there's no one doing this stuff, so I'm forced to do it, you know, like all myself.
Yeah.
And you know, I do love the run and gun filmmaking, but like I think that's one of my big goals is like let me have someone else film it for a chance. Let me have someone else like the idea that I could just direct and only focus on directing like kind of sounds crazy to me. Like I'm like, that's all I have to do. Like I'm so used to like I got to go move the lights now. I got to go, you know, all this. So yeah, alone is possible. But just be prepared. It's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, to me, when I saw FLAVA, I think it was at the Flicks Brew House for like an Iowa Screenwriters Alliance showcase.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it really stuck with me. I mean, easily like, and I'm gonna gas you up a little bit here, but like, and I apologize if it's embarrassing, but like, out of all the films on the screen that day, that was like the one that really stuck with me. And like, I said in like my questions to you that like the visual effects didn't get in the way. It didn't stick out. It felt like very much part of the world, and it was really impressive. So like when you are doing everything, including the visual effects, like one thing that I think is beneficial is you have a through line of a vision all the way through.
Right.
But like, how do you go about achieving that vision, like with a very small crew, or, you know, kind of on your own, in reference to FLAVA specifically?
Yeah, it's honestly a lot of it is you just have to prepare. Pre-production is, I mean, honestly, probably the most important part to put your energy into. And a thing I try to do with just all my filmmaking is practice outside of the shoots. Like I've seen some people that the only time they're, you know, directing or they're filming is when it's like the actual shoot. But to me, that's like a football team going out to play and never doing practice. Like you need to be practicing that stuff. So FLAVA was a long process of like, I really got into the aesthetic of like neon signs and like fake companies and like, so a lot of it was just diving into that, building all this kind of lore and mythology. And that's kind of my approach to visual effects is just, like I try not to just do it to do it. It has to kind of tell a story on its own. I'm gonna drink this water quick because my mouth is getting.
Yeah, it was really like you did a great job of world building. It felt very much like looking back, I hadn't seen the new Blade Runner movie, but it felt very like in that realm where you created a world, and it was like FLAVA, the world of FLAVA. I don't know what if you had a name for it, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, no, that was the entire inspiration was behind FLAVA was in Blade Runner. You see these giant digital billboards of these like models and whatnot. And so my idea was like, what would life be like for those people that have like these 200-foot images of themselves projecting over a city, and like the kind of responsibility that comes with that. And so yeah, that was just a really fun thing to like dive into. And I watched a lot of Blade Runner for FLAVA. Like that's I think a very obvious inspiration for that one.
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to hide that at all.
Yeah.
My goal is just like Blade Runner but hip hop, like put it together. That was my
Then that came through, and it almost like it felt like it almost had like an Eastern feel, like more Eastern than like industrial, like more Asian.
Right.
The color palette or something gave me that feel.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a Blade Runner 1-for-1, like where it was like you were biting it. It was just like an influence that you could feel a little bit.
Yeah. There's a lot of Hong Kong in it. I think that was where that inspired, because Hong Kong today looks like cyberpunk. Like it's kind of like it's a crazy city.
Yeah. Man, that film was so impressive. Like, talk about. I know we're getting away from visual effects, but that actor, you work with him a lot.
Lakin, the main one.
Yeah. I mean, amazing. Like, where is he hiding? And does he only like do stuff with you? Like, I'm like serious. He's really good.
No, I love Lakin, and he's ready to act. Like he's like people just don't. I don't know. Like,
I want to work with him. I felt that way since I've seen FLAVA. So.
I think the film community, and I think it's not just Iowa, but all in general. Like, we work with who we know, who we're comfortable with, friends. I think we sometimes just don't divert from that. Like, I have that issue. I definitely need to let more people in and work on my stuff. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I love Lakin. I've gone to school with him since middle school. We actually weren't friends until college. We were like completely different social ranges in high school. Like, like never talked. Yeah, met up with him and Skylar Ferguson too. Those two, we both just started making movies, and yeah, love working with them.
That's awesome. Yeah, and once again, like, it's awesome how maybe two people that would never talk in high school come together because of community, because they make movies. And I think that's a good segue, because Lakin was also in Miles. Again, just like I was watching it, and it was one of those films where you're watching it and you're having this feeling of like I'm going to try to find a diplomatic way to say this. Sometimes you watch something and you kind of can feel where it's from, like a region. You know that it's a Midwestern film, or you know it's like an East Coast film. This like I didn't know where it was made. It was like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know. If I didn't see that it was from you and Lost Utopia films, like I would have been like, oh, this is a new Spider-Man movie.
Oh yeah.
You know
some people have asked me like, what was it like filming in New York? And I'm just like, mission success. That was just Des Moines. Like,
yeah, and you did an amazing job. So like, what was the push to make that film? Like, can you talk about your inspiration and sort of the visual effects inspiration too? Because I mean, really impressive work.
Yeah, that was up until that point, I only had really done like original work, which, you know, I mean, I love my original short films, but I was like, I kind of want to do something that like has a better chance of like really kind of getting out there. And Tobey Maguire's, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man series, like there's certain movies I say are kind of like my foundation filmmaking films. Like, they're the ones that just like, it's where it all kind of like started. Like King Kong is there, Spider-Man's there. Always loved it, especially like the visual effects of it. And whenever I do visual effects, I do try and do some type of challenge, whether it's, you know, let me make a cyberpunk city, let me do like a astronaut. And Spider-Man was, the big challenge of that was, I got to make New York, and I have to make a man swing, essentially, you know, and act like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a really thrilling challenge, and I developed it over a few years. Like, it went through a lot of different phases and drafts. And yeah, I think from getting like the draft done to delivering it, that was about like a 9-month project for me.
Wow.
So
Well, I mean, did the overall reaction of that film on the internet surprise you? Because it seemed like from watching from afar, it seemed like people really liked it.
see, the reaction is I have a weird bittersweet relationship with Miles.
Yeah.
Because like, and a lot of it you kind of have to like put in the context of like, I finished it like a month after the pandemic started, so we were like all in quarantine. And so like, biggest thing I've ever done, all these comments and whatnot. But I know how my mind works, and going through comments, like I'll read 100 good things and it just does nothing, but like that one bad one really does it. This was a short film where maybe 98% of the comments are positive, but there's thousands. So that 2% is not just one comment. I have hundreds of people. And usually I had movies, like when I'd get negative comments, it was stuff I'd agree with. Like, oh yeah, I definitely do need to work on that. But these ones were like, not only were my fears being validated, now stuff I thought I did good on, people are like, this sucks. And like, I'd share it on Instagram. People just be like, this is shit. Like, So that mixed with like being in quarantine, like it kind of put me in like a depression for a bit, to be honest. Like, I just was stuck in seclusion, just like with these comments. And like, again, most of them are positive. Like, like if you would just look at it, it's a good reception, But it really, like, any confidence I even faked having I had just got whoosh, like it was a house of cards. It just got like knocked down. I didn't make a short film for like 2 years after that.
Wow.
Mix of like, one, I made the mistake of saying I'm going to do a second one, and that putting that expectation out, just like I got in this weird headspace of just like, no matter what I do, someone is going to think this is shit, and that just made me not even want to like make it. So it really kind of soured me on stuff for a bit, which sucks because like I love the movie, have a lot of great memories making it. But it was that put me in a weird space. Like I really kind of had to redefine like, why am I making movies? Like, is it just for validation? Is it just, like, it kind of made me confront like all my perfectionist tendencies, and it was a learning experience. And yeah, I'm starting to come around on like, okay, I did a good job on it, but like, there's just like scenes and moments where I watch it and like it's just those comments. Like it's weird. So it kind of made me shape like with my Godzilla stuff, which is even more popular than Miles. I'll maybe go through, check out like the top comments, and then like I'm good. Like I'm not obligated to read the comments on YouTube.
No.
And I forgot that somewhere along the way. And also looking back on Miles, like I should have remembered at the time, like, this is Spider-Man. So a lot of these people either could be kids, it could be people trolling. Like, like it's not a reliable, but like when you put 9 months, like that was a short I'd be working on from like 2 p.m. to 5 a.m. just like grinding away, like that sucked. But it was a really good learning experience, I think, overall. So,
well, a couple things there. One, I'm glad that you can now see the positive in it, you know, but also like, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. Honestly, like I think that's really important for people to hear.
For sure.
Because there's like a huge vulnerability anytime you put a project out, and the internet, millions of people can see your project. Like, there's no barrier to them seeing it. They just, if it goes viral or there's no way to say that millions of people might not see your project. Right.
Yeah.
And then you open yourself up to a million people's opinions.
Exactly.
And I don't think people think about that. And I don't think we talk about that feeling that you had enough, the feeling of self-doubt that is brought on by comments from strangers.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the internet. Like, people can make those comments.
That's something that makes me a little afraid for newer generations of filmmakers. Like I see just coming up on like TikTok and whatnot. Like I understand why they wouldn't, but like if my advice to someone who's making movies, like honestly, 2 years, just make them, don't even post them. Like just, I think you should have a foundation of movies that are just for yourself, your friends. Like once you give it out to the world and you get those negative comments, like I would just hate for that to be someone's first experience making a movie and then they just completely, lose any hope or passion, because that's really, you should make it because it's just fun for you. And I don't know, I get nervous for younger filmmakers coming up because the internet is only getting nastier since COVID, and yeah, people are just mean, and I just hope people don't get discouraged.
Yeah, and I think this is a good note that, we won't preach too heavy on this podcast, but like if you are making comments on the internet, make them constructive, make them positive. There's like, you're not doing anybody a favor by saying this sucks.
Yeah, no, by all means, like if you have a critique, at least expand on it.
Yeah, or just reach out to the filmmaker and have a conversation.
Yeah. Just saying, and like sometimes I think you also need to I don't want to say some people need to be coddled, but like if you see a short film that is obviously made by a child, for example, like you need to take that into, like I feel like people just use the same benchmark for everyone. And it's like, guys, we gotta, you can be nice and not have to completely ruin someone's day. Like it's easy.
Yeah, and I think at least within our communities here in the Midwest, we have really supportive people. But
yes,
I think this is in a weird way a good segue to like misconceptions about what visual effects can do, because like you're never gonna produce, especially like you doing this yourself, like a perfect film, right? Like that's what we're all achieving. I was watching this, strangely enough, this hockey documentary last night, and a guy I really like, his name's Ray Bourque. He used to play for the Boston Bruins and the Colorado Avalanche. He said, I'm always in search of that perfect game, and it never happens, but I'm always looking for it. So like, what visual effects has like an end, like where you're like, I can't do anything else. Like, what are these common misconceptions that people come to you and they're like, hey, I want to do this, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's hard because people see visual effects and that's kind of like an umbrella term, but that's really like subcategories of subcategories. Like me myself, as a visual effects artist, I say I do compositing, which is taking stuff that's not in the image and blending it, coloring it to make sure it fits. Animation, so that would just be 3D movements and whatnot. And then I have maybe like some particle experience, which would be like replicating elements like lightning, fire, like that type of stuff. But people say visual effects and they're just like, okay, so you can do all of it. And it's like, I'm always a little apprehensive taking on visual effects projects that's not for my stuff. Yeah. Because like, it's so interwoven into like my workflow. Like I know that I could shoot this thing a certain way, and I'm going to edit it a certain way. I'm going to use the sound effects in a certain way to make it work. But when it's like, and if something doesn't work, it's my own movie, so I can be like, all right, cut in the shot, move it on. But when it's someone else's, it's like there's certain elements you just can't control, and it gets scary because like everything I know came off of YouTube. Like nothing. I don't have any like just like natural visual effects. Like I'm still today always looking up like, how do you do this? And there's sometimes I'll be asked to do stuff and there's just no tutorials, and that's like such a terrifying feeling. But it forces you to really get inventive, and just figure out how to do it. Yeah, it's what was the original question?
Just like some common misconceptions, which I think you answered, because really like what you said is that special effects is like this umbrella term, and people essentially, when people hear that phrase special effects, it's like, oh, he can do anything,
right?
Which is not the case. And like so I think it was interesting that you talked about sort of like getting set up for success. So like in production, setting you up for success in post-production, and how it's easier when you shoot stuff. That's kind of what I'm learning about right now as a DP, is like there's a couple projects I'm doing with special effects where I'm talking to the artist ahead of time, and they're like, hey, I need this, this, and this to be successful. And like, how important is that for you once you get to post to like be set up for success? Can it determine your success or failure? Like being like your assets that you're given?
Kind of. It's vital. There's some of it that's like on me still. Like I gotta, figure out how to make the I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but so essentially, yeah, it is very helpful to increase the chances that that final product looks good. Like I usually know vaguely that I can pull off what I'm accept to do, but visual effects like references, storyboards, shot lists, any of those things like that can be done beforehand, and being on set is great just to see how it is going to be filmed, if I can influence that at all. Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely another thing where whatever you can do in pre-production is only going to help the end product like massively. You know?
So would you say, like, for filmmakers who are working on set in the visual departments, like if they're working with you as a visual effects, and I keep saying that, and I think we're going to touch upon that in a second, because I think that was one of my questions. But anyways, I digress. Like, how important is it having those conversations ahead of time? Would you say that is like a best practice for people like myself as a cinematographer to like have as many of those conversations with a visual effects artist ahead of time?
Yeah. I say if you're not if you're not sure how the effect is being done, definitely have those conversations, because stuff does require. Like, one tip I can give anybody right now who's working with a visual effects artist, because this sometimes still doesn't happen, and sometimes you can't control it. But if you can, do a shot that is locked off, and then do a shot with movement. That sounds like such a simple thing, but that makes such a huge difference, because doing a visual effect on a shot that isn't moving, that you can later add camera shake to, is infinitely easier than a shot that you need a motion track and do all that. And that's something people just, you don't know what you don't know, unless you have those conversations with a visual effects artist. So yeah, I definitely would say have those talks. Even if possible, just like tiniest bit of education on whatever effect you're asking, just so you kind of like, there's usually going to be a YouTube tutorial for it somewhere.
Yep.
So even if you don't understand how to perform it, still just seeing like how the visual effects artist is approaching it and building it will only help you when you're actually filming it to pull it off.
Yeah, and those sort of cross knowledge areas are where I think people in certain positions on film sets or, in post or pre-production can really like make films better. It's like, I'm trying to have more knowledge as a DP about, visual effects, because it just makes me a better DP.
Yeah.
Just for like a really quick terminology thing, when you say locked off on the tripod, like, do some people refer to that as a plate, like grabbing a plate?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, 100%.
And because like you said, it's easier to just add camera motion later. It just makes your job easier.
Yeah. No, that's honestly, like, if there's any secret sauce to my visual effects, it is adding camera shake. Like that and the motion blur hides so many errors, so many especially this Godzilla project I've been doing, it's completely found footage. So the camera is really shaky, and that just, the amount of stuff I'm able to get away with, it feels like cheating, because there's a lot of work other animators probably would be doing that I'm just not, because it's completely hidden in all the chaos.
I want to talk about this Godzilla project because I really don't know much about it. I've seen some stuff on the internet, but I haven't followed as closely as I followed like the previous film. So just tell me what's going on with Godzilla.
Yeah, so it's called Project Monster, and it's a web series I've been working on since, I think, late 2023. And it's basically a collection of found footage. So like this previous one I did was like a 90s kind of corporate like safety video. Like it would like show a monster attack and then show a reconstruction with like really shitty like animated character, and it's basically just all these collection of tapes from like the 50s to the early 2000s, chronicling this world that's just been living with monsters like Godzilla, King Kong, like all these, creatures and what that kind of does. And it's been massively fun. One, because the worse it looks, the better. So filming it, like, I get to ditch all the rigs, I get to ditch all the crazy equipment. Like, it's just run and gun, just like old filmmaking that like I grew up on. And it's fun recreating eras. Like, my favorite one I've done so far is the second one called Living with Monsters. And it's like a 1950s kind of just like information thing on just like how monsters start in this world, and like it has a host who's kind of it's just like doing the transatlantic accent and like all this stuff, and I got to go and like film these monsters and then put it in black and white and make it look like 1950s. Like, it's been just this really fun project of just kind of harkening back to all these different filming styles throughout the 50s and 60s, and just putting monsters in it. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I'll link everybody to these films that we're talking about in these projects, because I need to catch up and watch some of these too. So when you what is it about Godzilla specifically?
Yeah, so Godzilla is my, like, I always say, for a lot of people, Star Wars kind of seems like the thing that like a lot of visual effects filmmakers kind of got started. For me, it was Godzilla. Like, it was my earliest child memory is my dad bringing me like a bunch of Godzilla VHS tapes. And like, it's a franchise that like really means a lot to me, because like I grew up on it, my dad grew up on it, my grandpa grew up on it. And it's really just like the foundation for not just like my filmmaking, but just loving movies in general. Like, that's just never changed, no matter whether I'm a kid, I'm an adult. Like, I love Godzilla. And so this project, again, was kind of just like, I kind of wanted to pay tribute to it. My grandpa passed away in 2021, and that was kind of what really activated the project to me. One, because like my dream ever since I was a kid was make it to Hollywood, make a Godzilla movie, and then, watch it in my local Cedar Falls theater, with my family. That theater's gone. My grandpa's gone. Like, it's that dream essentially is, so different. And his death really just kind of made me like, why am I waiting for Hollywood to call and let me make a Godzilla movie? Like, I've been practicing these tools and I'm almost on my 20th year of, being a filmmaker. So it really was just like, I'm just going to go for it. Like, I love my original films. I love, like those personal stories, but at the same time, I'm only getting older. I'm only having less time. Like, I need to get my work out there. Like, I need people to see like what my skills can do. And it's been easily my most successful project yet. And any like industry connections or like feedback I've got have been from that project. So yeah, it's been a really fun and interesting 3-year journey almost. So
I gotta thank you again. This has been like a very moving conversation. Like, your vulnerability, sharing like your passions, your reasons for doing these things. Like, this is really important for people to hear, I think. And my dad's father, he's like my Star Wars guy. I'm one of the Star Wars guys that you referred to. That was like my entrance when I first saw that. I was like, just entranced, and it's. I think it's really important to like not lose sight of those things as a filmmaker, is like your why, and your why can be as simple as my grandpa.
Right.
That's why, because of my connection with watching VHS tapes with him as a kid, and that's beautiful. And I think that the world is better when people like yourself put their skills out there and sometimes don't wait for permission. I think that's another great sentiment that you shared, is like, don't wait for permission. Just do it. Like, you don't need to ask anybody's permission. Sure, like if you do something and you get a cease and desist letter, that's a different story. But like, put it out there, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that cease and desist letter could get people interested in something you do. Have you ever had anything like that? Have you ever ran into any problems?
I'm kind of waiting too, because the company that owns Godzilla is really notorious. Like, there's an infamous Godzilla fan project called Godzilla Heritage from the early like 2010s. That's like really known in the community, because their mistake was they tried to do a Kickstarter with it, which,
when funding's attached,
technically, you're making money off of it. So Toho came and like shut it down, and that kind of killed fan films for Godzilla for a while.
Have you had any contact with the people that do Godzilla? Have they?
Not well. Because of these videos, I actually got to do an official Godzilla commercial.
That's what I thought.
Last year. Okay. But my stuff hasn't come up. Thankfully, I'm kind of waiting for that letter, but it's also kind of like, I don't know. That's like punk rock filmmaking. I feel like if I get like a
100%,
like shut it down. Like,
And I think I think you are a punk rock filmmaker too. Like, and also I'm glad you brought that up, because like I feel like Godzilla like is those kind of films are so in line with what you talked about, which is like, just go shoot it. Like, because they had to figure that shit out. Like they had to figure out how to make Godzilla exist. Like and how did they do it with the early films?
So the earliest films, which people get a lot of flack, they get a lot of flack, but I love it. It was classic, just man in a rubber suit.
Okay, I thought so.
Acting as Godzilla. Okay. And now that's kind of transitioned over to visual effects, which is its own kind of controversy within. Yeah. There's a lot of controversies among Godzilla fans, but that's one of like, the classic practical versus CG.
Yes.
In my case, I mean, there's no, like, would I like to do a Godzilla movie with a guy in a suit? Hell yeah, but I don't have the money. Like the best thing I think that illustrates why it's good to be the visual effects artist of my own movies would be that on my last Godzilla short film I did, it's about 20 minutes. There's maybe roughly 270-ish visual effects shots. If I were to charge someone for each of those shots, like 250, which is like pretty low for visual effects. Yeah. That short film that I spent $300 on suddenly is about $70K. Yeah. Like, so when you think about that difference, like being your own visual effects artist, like the only thing that's going to cost you is time, which is a valuable resource within itself. Yeah. But it's not going to put you like deep in a hole of like money, like it's really only going to just kind of affect your interpersonal, I guess. But yeah, so it's the visual effects in Godzilla is really, it's been a really fun thing to mix. And it's kind of like what I said with the Miles stuff, how it kind of like knocked me off that confidence. Godzilla was like my initial, like he's like the thing. So like for me, it's really going back, like way back to my roots. Like before I even wanted to do movies, I wanted to draw Godzilla comic books. Like as a kindergartner, that was my dream. So yeah, like I've noticed some cynicism around like, and not just my project, but like other projects in that community of like, fan films, it's not original. And I can understand that, but my perspective is the process is literally no different. The only pro is maybe you have a little bit more of a foundation of writing, but with that, you also have expectations of people that they know this. So it's its own different challenge. And it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, those huge franchises, they're going to come with like built-in critics no matter what, because everybody has the it figured out for what Star Wars or Godzilla or Marvel should do. And yeah, I don't pity I pity those people that are involved, like honestly sometimes, because it's like you got to deal with such intense personalities sometimes. My friend Spencer and I are working on a documentary, and maybe I'll get this will be the cease and desist, I don't know. And one of the guys that hopefully will be in it, barring like with his permission, is Dave Filoni of Lucas.
Oh wow!
And he's a goalie, and he plays hockey, and he's very good at ice hockey. He's a very good goalie.
I didn't know that.
And he plays in this hockey tournament that we're making a documentary about. And just like when we got to interview him, we had to get it approved by Lucas and Disney, and they were like, "You cannot talk about Star Wars."
Oh, that's amazing.
Which I totally understand. And I would never, ever talk to that guy about Star Wars. Like, that's the last thing I would ever talk to him about. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because he's probably just bombarded in his life with people being like, this is what you need to do with Star Wars. You know?
Oh, man. That's crazy.
I think we should just be happy that Godzilla and Star Wars and all these other franchises that we grew up with kids are still making stuff, and and stop being as critical. That's my high horse for the day. Is just you get to watch Godzilla movies still, new ones. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's cool that you're part of that too, as like in the canon of Godzilla. I think that's really awesome. Is Godzilla the hardest thing you've ever had to do, or what was the most difficult thing you've ever had to do visual effects wise, and like how did you do it and get past those obstacles?
Godzilla's been tricky because it requires a lot of animation, which is my newest of, I guess, my visual effects skills. Like just learning the physics of just like how something moves and looks natural. And like a big thing with Godzilla is like he's a big 100-ton thing. So like when he steps, you got to animate that jiggle on his thigh. Yeah. Like there's all these physics I've never really thought about, but it's really, again, it's like really small details, but it still feels like storytelling, just like doing all these little things. It's technically it's my most involved visual effects, but I'm kind of reaching a point where, like, experience wise, it's like I've been here before. Like, it's not like it's a lot, but I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not thinking what if. Like, I've been here. I kind of know where to do it. Whereas hardest thing probably would be my short film, The Spaceman, I did in 2017, because that involved like a astronaut floating in space and like a wormhole and all this stuff. And that was really early in my visual effects, and I really did not know if I could pull those off. So yeah, it's a weird way how filmmaking works. Like, things that once were like just a really big mountain to get over, now it's just another little step in creating a project. It's been something I'm noticing the older I get and the longer I'm doing this.
Yeah, I think it's exponential in a way, like where the problems get harder, but you have more knowledge to solve the problem, so the problems are easier.
Yeah.
Which is, like, I think why filmmaking is such a lifelong pursuit, because I'm never going to know everything. Like, that's ridiculous.
And I think it's important. Something I'm working on is really stopping to admire those moments that you haven't really, you kind of just get like numb to. Like, I remember the first time I wrote a script and hearing someone read it out loud, that was enough. Like, that was, but now, like, 30 short films later, that's just like so commonplace. So, like, it really, I think, is important to take moments to just like savor like those little things you get over. Like, it might be a small victory, but years ago, that small victory to you would have been like massive. So really just like taking that time, watching your old work, seeing like that growth, really important, because it's really easy, just as humans in general, you just get numb to something that makes you happy. Like, eventually, okay, what's the next thing? I need more. Like, you really need to kind of sometimes just go back and like, wow, like you have an entire company. Like, you can sit back and just be like, I have actually built this. I am the boss. Like, that's incredible. Like, and you kind of get numb to that sometimes. So it's good to just go back and really just savor the little things.
Yeah. Once again, incredibly well said. I think this, every time I do this, every time I sit down at this table with people, I'm like blown away by where these conversations go. And this has like been more of a conversation about filmmaking philosophy than visual effects almost. And
it's kind of been therapy, like film therapy. I've enjoyed it.
I appreciate it so much. And I just, coming into this, we didn't know, I would say we didn't know each other that well. So I just really am like blown away at your vulnerability and your ability to just like put it out there and tell people like even some of this bad stuff, I think that's really important for people to hear. And because people get stuck in these ruts, just like you and I have got stuck in ruts. And if anything we're saying on this podcast helps one person get out of a rut and get back to making films, then, we've done our job here. Yeah. So the really important conversation I think we're having, that's just not focused just on visual effects itself, but you've talked about philosophies of visual effects though, and we've talked a lot about a lot of different philosophies, but do you have a philosophy when it comes to visual effects that's like, this is how I approach, this is my belief on this way of doing things?
There's a few I have. Like, one I have is humans see humans first. And what that means is, no matter what the shot is, if there's a human face in it, that is always what the people's eyes are usually going to go to first. And so in visual effects, that context would be like, say this poster here, there's a poster in this room. I've realized this isn't visual. But like, say I wanted that poster to be something that's more, like related to the story, or it's foreshadowing, or like, something like that. You can get away with doing a pretty bad effect if it's in the shot, because people aren't going to be looking at that. They're always going to go to the humans first. And honestly, a lot of my visual effects, I just kind of approach like it's a magic trick. Like, all people see is what's in this frame. As long as I just focus on what's that, like, there's so much you can really get away with. Like, one of my easiest effects, I think people could do is just like putting something on a TV. Because usually people just put an image on and call it good. But like, if you look at a TV screen right now, it's not just an image. There's reflections on it of the room it's in. It might be a little soft. Like, you really just need to just like study the world around you. Just look at how light hits stuff. Look at how things interact, how they like intersect. I live and die by like foreground, middle ground, background. Especially with Godzilla stuff. Like, there's no better way to get across how big he is if he's in the mid ground, and then in the foreground I have cars or people or something watching. That immediately tells you, like, oh, he's fucking big. Like, that is a big monster, you know? Like, if the humans are having to be thrown out of focus to focus on that, like, he is giant. So yeah, really just understanding, like, as a visual effects artist, cinematography is probably the most skill as a filmmaker that comes over, because you need to understand how a camera is capturing stuff, you know, how the aperture is affecting it. Like, the easiest visual effects are the ones that I can just throw out of focus, like in the background. Like, I love doing, like, you can, that's something anyone, honestly, like, if you do a locked off shot, you could put anything in the background, throw it like out of focus, the bokeh, like, easy, like done. Like, that's easy to do. So yeah, really you just need to study your world, look at art, just understand how cameras capture things. And yeah, it's really just kind of replicating that in visual effects. And the biggest tragedy of a visual effects artist, honestly, is that if you do your job perfectly, no one even notices it. Like, the best visual effects are invisible ones. It's not, you know, the T-Rex chasing you or whatever. It's like, oh, there's a cord there that, you know, Gaffer didn't find or anything, replaced it. Oh, now you don't even, like, people will never know. Like, that's really, like, visual effects, but no one ever knows. Like, your job is essentially to be invisible.
Yep.
And it takes a lot of work to be invisible.
Wow. I would have never imagined that this conversation would show me the intersection of cinematography and visual effects. So, and, like, everything you were saying, I was like, that's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I have to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. And I just wouldn't have, it's funny because we've talked about, like, connecting points. This was a connecting point for me that, like, really, that's it. Like, visual effects is cinematography in a way. And I'm glad you mentioned light too, because that's one thing that I've noticed that makes a successful visual effects you know, piece happen is the lighting feels real. The lighting reflects the environment that maybe this thing is put into. And that's something that I think we're working in a medium of light, you know, and when you bring a computer into it, sometimes that's forgotten maybe because and I think really, like, it's really refreshing to hear you talk about all these things that I think about, because really that's, like, what you're doing is you're essentially creating sometimes from scratch, sometimes, or with a base level of something. You're creating a shot. You're putting all of the elements that I think about as a cinematographer in, and I just think that, man, what a great lifelong pursuit to have also, because, like, you always can have fun and experiment, right?
No, that's what's been fun about 3D is, like there's a free app I have on my phone right now called Camtrack AR, and that pretty much allows me to do digital cinematography. So, like, I could, like, walk across a room, you know, all the camera movements, and it will save that as a digital camera, and then I can put it in a 3D scene, and it's still, like, all my movements. But it's, like, the best case scenario for filming a scene, because you can control the sun. Like, it's helped me understand, like, how I want to do lighting, like, best, like, you know, what can you subtract to make the image, like, it kind of has helped me rebuild, I guess, my understanding of, like, building a visual image. And I think people shouldn't look at visual effects as, like, this other thing separate. Like, it's really just, it's post-production. It's just a subcategory of editing. It's just, it's part of the workflow. And for me, I just love it, using visual effects just for, like, the story potential. Like, say I have to just settle with a red chair in a scene, maybe I want it to be blue. Now it's blue and it's, like, closer to my vision. Like, it just really helps me just dial in, like, what exactly it is I want. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, I've noticed some people, like, think I'm just a visual effects artist, which I mean, I do a lot of visual effects. I'm not going to deny that. But, like, if there's no story or nothing attached, like, it just doesn't really, like, for me, it's just so intertwined into how I make movies. I don't even really consider visual effects, you know, like, its own thing. Like, it's just part of my filmmaking toolkit.
Yeah, it's just another tool in the tool belt.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it doesn't, what I like about your approach is it doesn't seem to, like, dictate everything. Like, I would assume, like, if you had the chance to make a short and you didn't, it's a short that doesn't need visual effects, you're not going to force it into it.
No, yeah, like, that's what's kind of tragic. Like, people only know the work that I put out. Like, for example, I have a really shitty script I wrote years ago about just these Native American teens wanting to make it big as professional skateboarders. Like no visual effects. Like it's just a complete drama. But people don't know that. They only know what I put out. So it's partially on me. Like I get it. Like the visual effects stuff is fun. But I'm kind of moving to a point where I'm like, you know what? I've been telling stories in like New York and all these like maybe I want to do an Iowa story. Like I kind of and like I love dramas. Like and I think that would be an interesting challenge to me. Like have stuff happen, no one dies, there's no shootouts, there's no like it's just so interesting because like my filmmaking again started when I'm 11, so like that my brain's hardwired for like crazy explosions, like da da da. Like two people just talking in a room and being a short, like that's hard for me.
Yeah,
like that's it. Like they just talk like that. Like there's no like it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're evolving as a filmmaker, and
Yeah.
I think our tastes and our desires and the stories we want to tell, evolve. And I think it's wise to pay attention to that and be like, you know what, maybe just a true narrative without any explosions or gags is in the future for you. And I guess kind of getting to the wrap up here, like what is next for you? What are you excited about in the visual effects realm and the filmmaking realm? Because like I think it is very important to remind people you are a filmmaker, not just a visual effects artist. Yeah.
Right now, working on the 4th part of my Godzilla web series, which I'm designing in a way where I can kind of drop off of it anytime I need to if like life gets crazy. Like you're not going to be left on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Like to do 4 or 10 episodes total, but we'll see. Doing that, and I've been really kind of itching to get into a horror movie, like a horror short film. Especially because like from when I kind of like fell off of filmmaking in the early 2020s to like now, like the Iowa film community has exploded like to a crazy degree. There's so many more people I could collaborate with now. Like there's makeup artists and like just all these things that I just feel like I weren't really there before are there now. And like I love this Godzilla stuff, but I do deeply miss being on a set with the actors. Like that energy you really like as someone who's an introvert, doesn't go out much, like that is my socializing time. Like without that, like I get really sad. Like I need to be like in the trenches making movies. So yeah, it's been a few years of kind of just like redefining what it is I want to do as a filmmaker, but I'm kind of, this Godzilla stuff is kind of giving me the confidence, like, you know what, yep, I can go make something. It's gonna be all right, even if it's not good, like you'll live. And yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years, but I'm pretty hopeful.
Yeah, that's good. And speaking of like hope in terms of filmmaking, is there something that you've taken with you in your career, some piece of advice, some anecdote that you would sort of leave somebody with that wants to be a filmmaker, that wants to do visual effects, something that really is a mantra of yours or something like that you've carried with you throughout your career?
One, I think for me is, and I mean, competition in film is good. Competition can drive stuff. I did, when I was younger, I'd suffer from like kind of a toxic competitive, not so much like I would be mean to others, but just like really hard at myself, always comparing myself to others, all that type of stuff. And advice I heard that I still just carry on today, actually I have a second one, but the first one I have is basically that no matter how good or bad someone is at something, it has nothing to do with you. And that kind of just always helps ground me. Like if someone I'm competitive with goes to Hollywood the next day and they make the best movie ever, that literally does not take anything away from me. I don't lose any skills. I don't lose, like there's all this kind of dumb stuff out there that filmmakers I feel like can kind of get caught in, just trying to be competitive with each other. And like competition should only be used to help you be better. But once it starts to go beyond that, like cut it out. So I would really just say, especially like in this TikTok age where people are, posting, the coolest photos, the coolest videos of their set, like all this stuff, like use it in a way that helps you. But aside from that, like don't get worried like what other people are doing. Like just do your stuff and you'll be good. And my other second advice, which I have written in my phone and I have to look at sometimes, is just, it's not that serious. That's something, again, almost 20 years doing this, I still need to remind myself, like I am just out there playing with monster. Like no one's going to die. No one is going to, suffer. Like there's people out there working like the hardest construction jobs, and I'm out here anxiety about filming a little movie. Like you'll be fine. Like just don't take it that serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really great parting thought for this, because you could easily look at our conversation about visual effects and say the same thing, like, especially when you're starting out. Yeah. Don't take it that serious. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Just trust the process, learn, and one day you're going to make something that you're really proud of. And I think you've already done that. I think you should be really proud of the stuff you've made. You've made a lot of really impressive stuff. And
thank you.
This was a great conversation that I hope a lot of people take a lot of knowledge away from. And the last question I'll have you answer is just how do you continue to keep yourself educated moving forward with visual effects? Because I think that's one thing I'd really like to leave people with, is like, once you get to that level where you can do some stuff.
Yeah.
How do you keep going on the educational journey from getting to that middle to high level? Because the base level is usually very available. Right. But like those higher end stuff, like what are you doing now?
Yeah. You have to really just always be a kid. Like you need to always be curious. Always find a way something that excites you. Like for visual effects, for me, there's always some type of shot I've never done before that would be like really cool to me. So you need to just find those things that motivate you to learn, that get you really excited. Being in the know definitely helps. Like, I don't know if you've reached this, but the older I get, I've kind of been reaching this point where it's like, I don't need to learn anymore. I know, you know what I mean? Like I can see where filmmakers have fallen into that. And you kind of become like obsolete. Like you really need to just let go of the ego of you knowing anything. Like always just be clay, ready to be turned into whatever. Like you need to be adaptable, and just always open to learn. There's always something you can learn from someone. Like I personally enjoy watching short films from like newer people, like younger, like whatever it is, like newer, because while like the technique and whatever isn't there, the ideas, like they're not jaded by, you know, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't, like they're really just out there just doing what they can, and that can be really inspiring. I think it can really just help you be like, just get you out of your head and like, okay, I just need to learn, have fun. Like it's the mindset really is everything when it comes to filmmaking.
You heard it here first, people. That was Tarrell Christie. I'm Bruce James Bales, and that's a take.